Thank you so much. All right, so in terms of what's bringing people here today, general information about beneficial electrification, and then someone here who specifically is looking to convert their buildings, that's great. Also just interest in learning about the AMPED project itself. Current level experience, oh, glad to have people in the room who already have some background with beneficial electrification. I hope we can also share some new information with you today. Considering buildings, that looks like, and some already have done work. Okay, so this is wonderful. Let's kick it off. Erin, next slide, please. All right, so this is our agenda. This is going to be, we're going to move through this information rather quickly. We want to be wrapping up at around 12:45. We will, of course, leave some time for questions. But starting out, we're just going to introduce ourselves, tell you the goals for today, introduce the campaign, talk about what beneficial electrification is, explore what your organization's relationship to fossil fuels might be, and provide a tool to help you think that through. Look at some specific ways to electrify your organization. And then in terms of the specific tools and resources that the AMPED campaign can provide, we'll show you some of those. And again, leave time for question and answers at the end. If you would like, we'd love to have you introduce yourselves via the chat. Also, as you do have questions, please put those in the Q&A. If you do put them in the chat, we might not see them, but if you have a specific question you'd like us to address, please put that in the Q of A. We will also pause periodically throughout the presentation to see if there are questions that we can answer right then and there. And again, time at the end for more. If you have technical issues, suggest you log in, log out, or again, let us know via the chat, and we can try to help you out with that. And at the end, there will be a very short survey that we're going to ask you to fill out to help us understand how we did today and what you would like to see in future webinars. So let's move ahead. Okay, and introductions. Go ahead. Next slide, please. All right, so our two presenters today are me. I'm Abby McHugh-Greffa. I'm the Executive Director of the Climate Solutions Accelerator, and I will pass it to David to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us for this webinar that kind of kicks off our webinar series for the AMPED project. I'm David Keefe, and I am the coordinator of the Greater Rochester Clean Cities Coalition. That is a local nonprofit that's been around since the mid-90s, and our goal is to reduce, to promote strategies and other things to reduce petroleum in the transportation sector. So we work with cars and trucks. Right now, we're doing a lot of work in the electric vehicle space, and our program is part of the Department of Energy Clean Cities program. There are about 100 coalitions across the country doing this type of work. My background includes about 10 years of fleet management experience for the city of Rochester, and I've been working with this AMPED project, co-electric project, for about 2 years, and I'm pleased to be part of this partnership.
Thank you so much, David. So yes, our organizations have been working together on this project and are really pleased to introduce it to you. In terms of the goals for today specifically, next slide, please. We're going to learn what beneficial electrification is, learn about the campaign. Hopefully, at the end, you will be interested and excited about electrifying your buildings and fleets. We want to stress throughout this whole thing that you don't have to do all or nothing. You don't have to do it tomorrow. But this is doable, and it's about getting on that path toward electrifying and having a plan for how you can completely electrify. And we will be leaving you with some resources and action steps, and then encouraging you to sign up for AMPED campaign updates. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of what the AMPED campaign is overall, go ahead to the next slide. Our goal is to mitigate the impacts of climate change by reducing carbon pollution caused by fossil fuels through the promotion of beneficial electrification in the Genesee Finger Lakes region. And when we talk about Genesee Finger Lakes region, what we mean is that 9-county region that the economic development area of New York State. So collaborative project, and go ahead. funding provided by these organizations. And we have, there have been multiple phases of this work already done. And so different funders have supported different aspects of that, but our organization, Greater Rochester Clean Cities, the City of Rochester, and the New York State Pollution Prevention Institute have all contributed to making this work possible. And we greatly appreciate that contribution because couldn't do it without the funders. Next slide, please. And our steering committee has been made up of representatives from about 20 prominent institutions around our region. You see that list of steering committee member organizations here. And then our creative partners who have provided the website that we'll encourage you to visit, the case studies, a lot of other great materials, Butler Till, Saussure Designs, Accountable Digital, and Grant Taylor Photography. They get all the credit for making this work look good. Next slide, please. All right, so the big question, important to know as a foundational element, is what is beneficial electrification? And it sounded like, based on that opening poll, that some of you have a sense of this, but since others might not be as clear, let's go to the next slide where we'll see it kind of laid out clearly. So right now, we currently use fossil fuels to meet most of our energy needs, but we need to transition to using clean energy to meet those energy needs instead. And as we do so, we want to maximize the co-benefits. So things like saving consumers money over time, benefiting the environment, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, improving product quality, public health, and/or quality of life, and fostering a more robust and resilient grid. So, it is, of course, just about straight up using the electricity, getting off of fossil fuels, but there's a lot of other reasons to do that, even if that reducing of fossil fuel use might not be a priority of yours. Next slide, please. And as we just said, there are many benefits. This is not a complete list here, but these are some of the ones that bubble up. Lowering operating costs. We have a really great example of that we're going to share with you a little later on. Improving public health, that largely refers to how, just burning fossil fuels inside a building does not create good indoor air quality. And similarly, burning fossil fuels outdoors contributes to poor air quality outdoors. So it's largely about air pollution, limiting the economic risks. And this one, I think, is, I don't know if you've seen in the news, but it's expected that natural gas prices are going to be rising significantly this winter. So those are the kinds of economic risks and limiting exposure to that we're talking about. Better management of the electric grid, reducing emissions, and of course, those emissions are what cause climate change and the serious consequences of that. Next slide, please. Okay, so I do want to pause for a moment and just see, do we have any particular questions that I can address already at this point about what beneficial electrification is? And if not, let's see, can I see? Thank you to those who introduced themselves in the chat. And again, if you weren't here right at the beginning, I would encourage you to go ahead and introduce yourselves. Okay, all right, looks like we can move on. Again, I'm going to encourage you, if you do have a question, please submit it via the Q&A function. So your specific organization. We here in New York State have the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which mandates some pretty ambitious greenhouse gas reduction goals over the coming 30 years or so. And you can see those outlined here, the 40% emissions reduction by 2030. Boy, that's coming up. It's right around the corner. 85% emissions reduction by 2050. And I'll say that is absolute emissions reduction. So you'll see these two different 85% emissions reduction by 2050 and net zero economy. So it's anticipated there will be a gap there, but that extra 15% will need to be made up through either carbon capture and storage technologies and or offsets. So net zero economy by 2050, 70% of the state's electricity from renewables by 2030, 100% emissions free by 2040. And the aspect of this law that I really think is most important to note, that 35 to 40% of the benefits of that overall investment will go to environmental justice communities. And this law was passed in 2019. There's still the state is still kind of working out the details, I would say. They're developing a scoping plan that will be available in early 2022, but it is clear that economy-wide, we're going to be needing to get to net zero emissions, and that is going to affect every sector of the economy, every organization, and so we need to start planning for that now. Next slide, please. So when you think about your own organization and where you are using fossil fuels currently, it is likely that your building heating system may be responsible for a large chunk of your emissions. Also, if you have vehicles of any type, large or small, it is likely that those are burning fossil fuels as well. But then there may be other ones too. How's your lawn mowed? How do you have other types of equipment, tools that may be burning fossil fuels? Of course, cooking, gas stoves are a big one in the restaurant industry anyhow. So it's the first place to start when you're thinking about your beneficial electrification journey is just to identify where you are currently using fossil fuels. And I think we have a poll that we're going to launch here to give you a second to reflect on that and provide us with a little bit of information about where your fossil fuel use is currently happening. Is that right, Aaron? Do I have a poll? Yes, having an issue, he says. Okay, well, maybe we will loop back on that poll, but you can also in the chat, if you want to share, for your building, your fleet, your organization, where do you currently use fossil fuels? I guess I should have mentioned this one as well. Your actual electricity supply. Do you know that you are currently sourcing electricity from renewables, or maybe you're not so sure? But this is, again, kind of first step for figuring out where you have opportunities to electrify. So I tell you what, let's go to the next slide. All right, so once you know where that fossil fuel use is occurring, you can identify strategies for transitioning to using clean, renewable electricity. And next slide, please. A lot of the work that our organization is doing right now is encouraging the adoption of heat pump technologies. And so, David will be telling you in just a minute about the vehicle side, but we're going to spend a moment here talking about heat pumps. And this is not a new technology particularly, although heat pump technologies have evolved considerably over the past several years to make them, better, more efficient, more affordable. But in essence, heat pumps work the same way as your refrigerator. So if you've ever put your hand behind your refrigerator, you would have noticed that the air is warmer back there. And that is simply because that big box, it's taking the warm air from inside and moving it outside. So instead of creating heat like a traditional furnace would, a heat pump simply moves it from one place to another. And it is powered by electricity, ideally electricity that is sourced from renewables. And this is how you can get to that fully carbon neutral, emissions-free heat for your buildings. And so the two main types of heat pumps are ground source and air source. And part of the beauty of these systems is that in addition to providing heat, they can also basically run in reverse to provide air conditioning as well. So, you see in the picture here in the lower one, that outdoor unit that would be associated with an air source heat pump really does look very much like an air conditioning condenser that you would see outside a building. But the way this works, and it almost seems like magic to me, but even on the coldest of cold winter days, that system can extract the ambient heat from the outdoor air, condense it, and move it into your building. And again, in the winter, run in reverse to cool your building. And ground source, I should mention, is probably more commonly known as geothermal. So if you hear ground source and you hear geothermal, that is the same thing, okay? One thing that's really important to emphasize, though, that we, if you remember anything today, maybe remember this, is that for any building, every building's different. What's going to be appropriate for one building is going to be different from another. So it is very important to start this process by getting an energy audit and to get your building heat pump ready. And what I mean by heat pump ready is that it has a tight building envelope, or in other words, it's well insulated and air sealed. So again, before you install a heat pump, you want to make sure that you got a really nice tight building envelope so it'll work as efficiently and effectively as possible. And then you can move forward with getting the heat pump technology. So energy efficiency and heat pumps definitely go hand in hand. At this point, I think let's move on to the next slide. And of course, cost is always going to be a major question. And I really wish I could give you a super clear, concise answer for how much it would cost and what the return on investment would be. But again, as I mentioned, every facility is different, every building is different. And so you really need to get that energy audit by a qualified professional who can come in and give you an estimate. For many businesses though, although the upfront cost is likely to be high, there are a lot of incentives, tax credits, financing options that can make these affordable. And of course, the energy audits themselves are highly subsidized, and so very, very affordable, usually just a couple of $100 for an organization. So getting this process started, want to get that energy audit, and then learn about your incentive, tax credit, financing options to see what the best path forward is. And in terms of cost, the other really important consideration here, thing you should know, is that operating and maintenance costs are typically very low. Again, because these systems don't create heat, they're simply moving it from one place to another, which is what allows them to be very, very efficient in comparison to a traditional heating system. Okay, next slide, please. So we have a little story for you, a success story example of how this is happening in our region, and that is about the Henrietta Public Library. Now, this was a new build, and it is important to know that new build and versus retrofit, it is going to be different. So again, you'll need to get that energy audit to find out what makes sense for an existing building. But in Henrietta, they decided to build a brand new library, twice as big, but by installing a geothermal system, they were able to cut their energy costs in half. So they are very, very happy customers there in Henrietta. And their library director, Adrian Pettinelli, talks not only about how this was a smart long-term investment or use of taxpayer dollars, but also the benefits that they've seen in terms of increased comfort and temperature consistency. Also maintenance. Apparently their previous boiler system was a regular hassle, frequently breaking down and having all sorts of issues. So again, from a maintenance perspective, from a comfort and temperature consistency perspective, they so far are having very, very good results with their geothermal system. And the installation itself was 54 wells, each of which was 200 feet deep, located under the parking lot. They have 36 variable heat pumps in the building, all of which are controlled just from a tablet or at their desktop. It's zoned into 8 separate zones, so they can, that's part of what allows for the consistency of heating, is they can bump one up versus the other. And these are, they have radiant floor system, which allows, for example, for outdoors and in the entryway, they have this floor system that melts the ice and has improved safety and reduced the need for shoveling. Again, that was something that the library director raved about, as well as, for example, in the children's section. The children's section where people are sitting on the floor, it's nice to have a nice toasty floor. So this is what they've seen, their experience in Henrietta. And I am going to pause here for a moment to see if anyone has any questions, clarity on these building heat pump systems. Again, this is just very introductory information. But if there's anything I can clarify about heat pumps specifically, I would love to take those questions now. And actually, I don't think we have any questions in the Q of A. Erin, does it make sense to try to do the poll at this point? The previous poll? All right, we're going to try it. Let's see if that poll about fossil fuel use in your building will work, or I should say your organization will work now? And I'm guessing that's a no. Okay. All right. Well, best laid plans. So sorry about that poll, but let's go ahead. And I think I'm now passing it to David. Is that right?
I think, yes, I believe so. Could we have the next slide, please? Okay. I'm going to talk about the vehicles and the way you charge them in my section here. And there are a couple of case examples that we want to discuss. So again, this is, as Abby was saying, this is very basic stuff. I mean, some of you probably have advanced knowledge that goes beyond this, but we want to introduce this with the basics, the high level stuff. So there are really three kinds of electric vehicles out there. There's a hybrid electric vehicle, or HEV, and this has a gasoline engine typically and an electric motor, and it does not require plugging in to get the charge. It uses a technology called regenerative braking, which means that as you brake, the energy from the braking action is sent back to the electric system and keeps the battery charged. So you don't ever have to worry about plugging in. The other advantage to this, of course, is that you have a gasoline engine and you don't ever have to worry about running out of a charge. It does provide higher gas mileage. I can give you a personal example. My wife has a Chevrolet Malibu hybrid, full-size vehicle, and it gets about 40 to 42 miles per gallon. So it's very fuel efficient in that sense. The second type, we're moving through the continuum of complexity and amount of electricity provided, is a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, or PHEV. This has an electric motor and an engine. It does have to plug in to keep the electrical system charged. It plugs into the term that's used in this field for charging stations is electric vehicle supply equipment, or for short EVSE. So this has the advantage of providing allowing the driver to run on electric, oftentimes without the use of the gasoline motor, and it gives better range, improved fuel economy. But again, we have this issue in this field called range anxiety, and where people are worried about running out of electricity when they're out in their travel. So with this type of system, the PHEV, you never have to worry about that. This is very popular. Probably the best example I can think of is a vehicle not made anymore or sold anymore, the Chevy Volt with the VOLT, very popular, had great range, and was a great option for people who wanted to have an electric option, but also be able to take it wherever they went. And moving down to an all electric vehicle, or sometimes this is called a BEV, or battery electric vehicle. This has only an electric motor, and you have to plug it in to charge it. There's a picture. I think that it's either I think that's a Nissan Leaf there. The Nissan Leaf is all electric. There's also the Chevy Bolt, BOLT, and a variety of others. As this field has evolved, this whole field of electric vehicles, there are more and more models available. Virtually every manufacturer has some offerings in the electric space, and this is only going to continue into the future. Now, I will say one of the issues right now with vehicles is that there are a lot of options for sedans and small SUVs and so on in the electric space. But what's lacking right now, really, when you go up the scale to even pickup trucks or heavier trucks, there aren't as many offerings now. But this is changing. There are going to be a lot more offerings in that space. Ford Motor Company's coming out with a all-electric F-150. F-150, I think, is the most popular vehicle sold in America. And that's coming out in a few months. It'll be a game changer. Some of the other companies as well. And, there'll be there will be all kinds of offerings in the light duty and the medium duty and heavy duty space. Next slide, please. Oh, how much? Let's see. Was this the next one? Okay. Yeah, there's lots of different types of charging. They rate this as level 1, 2, or 3, DC fast charging and wireless. So this chart just shows you what the type of electrical requirements are. Level 1, you can charge in your garage with your regular household current, 120 volts. The greater the voltage, however, the faster the charge and so forth. So this shows you the charging times and the range you would get out of that. Level 1 is typically used at a home, although it could be used at a workplace. Level 2, some people are putting in level 2 in their own homes, but that's 240 volts. But again, that's the same as your dryer. If you have an electric dryer, so no big deal. Virtually all houses have 240 volt options. That could be residential or commercial. Level 3, and this is a level where, as these are developed and rolled out, it'll be a game changer for people being able to travel, further distances, because they can find a charging station on the thruway or I-490 or whatever. So this is happening. There's more and more coming out. Level 3 and DC fast charge are roughly the same, and then wireless is kind of a new development too, although not too common at this point. The cost of these vary widely. You can get a level 1 charger for a few $100s, or a level 2 charger, I mean. So it's all going to depend on the speed of the charge, whether it's networked or not networked. So there are a lot of different variables that go into charging stations, or EVSE. Next slide, please. Okay, how much do EVs cost? This is kind of like the heat pump question. It's going to vary a lot based on the make and the model, and battery size is a big influencer too. Some of these options, like the Nissan Leaf, for example, the new one, it has 2 different battery sizes. So the battery size is going to determine what the range is going to be. So the smaller the battery, the cheaper the car, and vice versa. But the thing is that there are more of these coming out. They're being produced on a greater scale now. So the price, it's just basic economics. The more you sell, the more the price will come down. There are also another factor, or different incentives. There's the federal $7,500 tax credit, which is available to many of the EV models. The New York State has a $2,000 drive electric rebate, and there are other tax credits for state government. So there's really have to look at the individual, what your state, of course in New York it would be what New York has, but what state and federal governments programs are out there to help reduce the purchase price. We know that we can't subsidize these forever. I think to kickstart this whole electric vehicle movement, the government incentives, rebates, and tax credits are important to help move the dial on this. The other thing about EVs is they might have a higher cost, initial purchase cost versus a gasoline equivalent, but you actually have lower operating costs because you don't have an oil change, you don't have all those moving parts that a gasoline or diesel engine has. So if you look at the total cost of ownership for how long you might have that vehicle, that could actually maybe even be more beneficial from a financial standpoint than a conventional vehicle. Next slide, please. Okay, a couple of success stories. I think it's important to point out that both the city of Rochester and Monroe County have both been leaders in the whole field of alternative fuel vehicles over a number of years. Both of them have been long time stakeholders of our organization, and the county, for example, was noted 2 years in a row of being the #2 green fleet in the United States in the green fleet contest. So they both have alternative fuel stations at their locations there, but they've moved to conversion of electric fleets. Again, the lower maintenance cost, the city talks about how it's 36% less for maintenance over a 10-year period. The total operating cost for the vehicles, $3,000 less than a gasoline-powered vehicle. I think this is an important point, really, that people have to drive these cars or trucks or whatever the case may be. And I think if people aren't happy with driving them, if they resist and don't want to take a certain vehicle, that can really undermine a program. But the driver impact is almost universally very favorable. So the county and the city and other organizations are going to begin moving towards larger EV electric vehicles like pickups. And as we move forward in time, other larger vehicles to do the work that these municipalities do. Benefits for those most disproportionately impacted by climate change. We talk about environmental justice and disadvantaged communities. When you have polluting fossil fuel vehicles in these communities, it certainly adds to the amount of poor air quality and so forth. Electric vehicles really kind of change that whole dynamic. Next slide, please. Charging stations, Rochester Regional Health, they've been a leader in this for a while. They are very concerned about, I guess, poor environmental conditions can affect health for sure. And so since they're a health organization, they think that this goes hand in hand, improving air quality and so forth. So they were successful in securing some funding and so forth and supplementing with their own funding to install 90 ports at Rochester Regional Health locations. Now in the terminology here, you have an EV charging station and then a hose that's attached to that is called a port. So almost all charging stations, public charging stations, have 2 ports or 2 hoses, just more efficient to do it. So they've installed 90 ports at locations with 40 more being added. They have a huge network of locations. I think they have about almost 40 different campuses or something. They got almost all of it covered by grants. They were very skilled in using that funding. And then the operating costs or the electricity that runs through there to charge these cars is covered by fees. So I think it's really interesting to note that the Rochester Regional Health staff is interested and motivated to convert to EVs, and one of the person driving this is actually one of our board members, who's the sustainability director there. Next slide, please. Okay, I think I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Abby.
Thank you so much, David. Okay, so of course, our goal, as we stated up front, is to inspire you to start doing this work in your own organization. And the AMPED campaign is here to provide some tools and resources to support that process. So next slide, please. As I mentioned, identifying where you use fossil fuels really is step number 1. And I believe Erin's going to share in the chat. We have a little worksheet that you can fill out that will, at least, you can kind of walk around, see, oh yeah, look, we are using fossil fuels over here and over there. So step 1, consider how your organization consumes fossil fuels. Next step, get educated on electrification solutions that are applicable to your organization. You're doing that, of course, by being here today, but also we have a lot of other resources that are available on the website, and that also, if you sign up for our other communications, that you will be receiving. So again, step 3 then being, please do sign up for news and information that you can use to support your beneficial electrification transition. This is of course a conversation that you will have to have throughout your organization with leadership. There is an education component to that. The idea of beneficial electrification is new to many people. So, wherever you kind of are in your organization, it's just a question of starting those conversations, providing those tools and resources, and making a plan for how to move forward. Next slide, please. Here's some shots, just a few screenshots here for you from the website, so you can get a sense of what's there. For buildings, for example, we can help connect you to the people who will provide energy audits. learn about those incentives and financing options. A lot of questions you may be having. So our FAQ section will probably address some of those. And then again, cost is always a consideration. And though the answer on both the EV side and the building side is always going to be, it depends, we have some tools available that can at least give you a general sense of what you might be expecting. Next slide, please. And we invite you to please follow us on social media. So again, I see that someone shared the link to the website there in the chat. We also have we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, be sharing regularly information about that. And there's so much right now in terms of not just through the AMPED project, but also other organizations around the state and the nation that are providing those educational tools. So we'll be sharing out not only our own content, but also content that we gather from other places that we feel is particularly helpful. And the success stories. This is another big piece of it that, and actually I should say, next slide, please. We have a few of these case studies on the website already, but we will be compiling more of these so you can get those specific details about, so how much did the project cost at the Henrietta Library, and what were the different, challenges, considerations that went into their process, to get a sense of where your organization might also fall on these things. So please check those out. And lastly here, we will be having regular webinars. This is, of course, our very first one. And it is, as we said, introductory level. So pretty basic information we're sharing here today. But as we move forward, we will be digging into some of the details a little more deeply. Today's webinar was on the 4th Thursday of the month. But moving forward, these webinars will be on the 3rd Thursday of the month, always at noon, and always with the goal of getting you out of here within 45 minutes. So we need to be wrapping up fairly soon. I will invite you, as I cover this last little bit of material, if you do have questions, this is the time to please make sure we hear those questions and are able to address them. So you can put those in the chat. And before we even get to that, we'll go next slide, please. But I have a question for those of you who are here. And that is, where is your organization on this journey already? Have you gotten an energy audit? Do you have a climate action plan? Maybe just share a thought or two about what your organization is already doing. Do you know if your heating system is burning fossil fuels? Do you know if your vehicles are currently running on fossil fuels? I see we have the organization assessment that was also just shared in the chat. So again, can kind of help you dig into these questions for yourself. But you might know the answer to these questions now, you might not know these answers yet. Perhaps a conversation with the facilities person at your organization, if you have one, would be a good step in the right direction. But seeing no questions coming in via the Q&A, last call. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so I want to thank you all for attending today. I'm sorry it named pretty much everyone Testerson. We'll have to figure out why that is and make sure people have their real names next time. But really good to have you here. I did appreciate in your introductions that we have a few friendly faces in the crowd, and know that our next webinar is going to be on October 21st, again at noon. The topic is getting started electrifying your vehicles, and that's when we will really be digging into these energy studies, incentives, and financing. So talking about the money and first steps.
Abby, I think you meant to say electrifying your building.
Electrifying your building. What did I say? Whatever I said.
You said vehicles.
Oh, well, thank goodness that you can all read the slide and David corrected. Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, getting started electrifying your vehicle, buildings, but the following month will be focused on vehicles.
November,
so vehicles,
right. Yeah.
Vehicles Gear Jam, join us in November. Again, thank you so much. Thank you to David. Thank you to the
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it.
Supporting us.
All right.
Have a good rest of your day.